First, I just want to say thank you to everybody who is attending and with us today. We really appreciate you attending these. If you've never attended a CalcuQuote presentation in the past or webinar, we try to do these on a monthly basis, really as an opportunity just to talk to industry leaders about what's going on in the industry, digital transformation, hot topics. The purpose of most of these webinars is to educate and to have conversations about what's going on in the industry. Most of you who are attending know who the future team is and probably are likely to know who we are as well. And it's an opportunity for us to just discuss what's going on within the world and with the industry because they are overlapping. So we initially direct these types of webinars, or this webinar specifically, as a series of discussions on digital transformation and the impact of APIs on supply chain. But I think we would be mistaken to not discuss also the trends that are going on in the market and what's going on in the industry right now, especially given, what has happened in 2020 as of last year, which has impacted what's going on moving forward. So kind of what we're going to do today is Tom and I are just going to chat about a few things that are going on. I have some questions prepared for him. Feel free, as I've mentioned many times, to put some questions in the Q&A and chat section as well. And we're going to just have a great time chatting today. So Tom, if you don't mind doing a quick introduction of yourself and a quick background on, Future in general, and then we can move from there.
Sure. Thanks, Kaitlyn, and thanks everybody for attending. Before I get started, I just want to extend a welcome to you all. I know that's been a really challenging year. I hope everybody's staying safe and healthy. I know we're rounding the corner. I'm excited about the vaccine coming out. I got notification from our local health provider that it's in the foreseeable future. So it's really exciting, and hopefully we'll be seeing you all very, very soon. And we'll get back to what we consider normal life. So I've been with Future Electronics, and Future Electronics was started in 1968 by Robert Miller, and we're a global distributor. We have offices around the world, and we have 3 automated distribution centers that work in tandem, all connected. All of our businesses are connected around the world. And as a company, we really strive to be a leader in supply chain.
Yeah.
Over our many years of being in business, we've connected with many, many customers. And it's really interesting as you look at the transformation into this digital world. And because I kind of look at it as we started this about 22 years ago. When I first started at Future Electronics, we were in what we would call traditional e-commerce business. We were using EDI as a method of communicating with customers. And as we move forward throughout the years, more and more capabilities have come into play. And I think with Industry 4.0 taking hold, there's a huge opportunity to connect more with more customers and really take an opportunity to share information real time.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's hugely important. And as I was kind of talking through the reason that we wanted to bring Tom on, he's been a key player with Future, but also with the journey of API development and discussion, and has been in the industry and seeing the different trends that are going on. So Tom, if you don't mind maybe talking a little bit about when and why Future decided to move to an API model and what that journey of the API development was like, and where that focus has transitioned since starting with Future.
Sure. So interesting is I met with Chintan probably about 6 years ago. I was visiting with customers in Dallas, and I was asked if I would meet with them, and we met at a Starbucks in Dallas, and wasn't really sure what I was walking into, but as you know, Chintan is a wonderful man and easy to talk to. And we were talking about CalcuQuote and using APIs and the concept of being able to connect with many customers or many suppliers all at once and being able to make decisions real time.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, and because it really caught my attention, because again, we're very involved in traditional e-commerce business, and we were mapping out what our digital transformation would be, and API really, in my mind, was the opportunity to connect with suppliers and customers on a variety of levels.
Mhm.
Not just with the exchange of looking for inventory and getting a price,
Right.
but also many of the different attributes. And as we started to explore it, we realized very quickly that API extends to our entire business,
Yep.
from a supplier to transportation to the exchange of information internally to connecting and sharing that information with our customers, which in the past would have been very, very challenging, but API allows us to do that across a wider platform with essentially a standard data set
Right.
versus as you know, in the traditional EDI sense, every customer has a spec and you have to try and map to that spec, and it becomes a little bit more challenging on how to manage each of those customers. And we have well over 3,000 customers connected in our traditional e-commerce business today.
Incredible. That's awesome. And I will say, I didn't know what to expect when I first mentioned him myself. So we're all in the same boat there, but pleasantly surprised. No, I think that makes sense. And I also find from our customer base, which are future customers as well, that API is not just a connection to suppliers. That's hugely important, but it also impacts lots of other pieces of their business. It's the ERP connection. It's the production line connection. It's everything that works together and just makes the world a little bit more efficient. How do you think your customers impacted the decision for Future to move to an API, and what has that impact been since the API has been released?
Well, I think, again, after meeting with Chintan and talking about different customers and having conversations with our own customers, we saw a big interest from the tier 3 EMS, tier 3, tier 4 EMS, the smaller EMS. They were early adopters. They saw the opportunity to really address the bid-to-bid process, which bogged them down. And the opportunity for them was to be able to handle quotes at a high volume that maybe a tier 2 or tier 3 has more resources to throw at. And so they saw a significant value to it. So immediately we started getting a lot of requests and a lot of conversations from those EMS partners of ours. And it really started to drive our strategy internally as to how we were going to address this.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's something that evolves over time. So from the initial decision for Future to move to that API, how has that evolved? And are there any plans on taking it even further in the future?
Yeah, it has. So we've looked at our entire business, and we believe that over time, API will impact or affect our entire business. From that first step of connecting with that price and availability API, we saw the opportunity on the order side, on the order acknowledgement side, and on the advanced ship notice side. Again, being heavily involved in the e-commerce piece of our business, and there's a lot of resources that we throw at that to keep that into the business up. And we see this as that next evolution where, again, simplifies the ability to connect with many customers and many suppliers across the world. It's one of the biggest benefits that I think we see is the data integrity piece of it. Again, dealing with a lot of different customers in a lot of different countries, part information doesn't always communicate clearly as a one-for-one. Whereas I see the API has really allowed us or provided us with an opportunity to get clean part numbers, whether you're doing a quote or whether you're searching for inventory.
Yeah.
It really provides a lot of benefits to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that's been the biggest improved area, I guess is the best way to say it, of business for future and like impacting the relationship that you have with your customers? Do you see that data integrity of being a key piece of that?
I think that I do think it's a big piece of it. I know on the quoting end of it, like many distributors and customers, we receive quotes in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
Spreadsheets being one of them, and when you're in the EMS space, of course, you're given a bill of material by an OEM, and that information needs to be cleaned up.
Yeah.
So the opportunity to clean that data up and be able to process a quote relatively quickly is significant for us. So from a productivity standpoint, I see a significant opportunity for us, but I also see a significant opportunity for the customer.
Yeah. Well, I think that was my next kind of thought that I was having of, while that's the relationship piece from the distributor to the customer, do you see this having an impact on, customer behavior and customer interaction with the future team, right? Because I think there's never a time from a automation standpoint that we want to cut out the relationship. We have a relationship built business. We love it that way, right? We all want to talk to each other more now than ever. But how do you see that impacting that potential relationship, or is there a way that it's enhancing it?
So I think it's having a positive impact on it. And I know when we started our digital journey, Frederick Miller had a vision, and the vision was to provide customers with an omni-channel. So it wasn't just going to be digital. It was, you were going to have the human interaction of an inside-outside salesperson, but you would provide them also with the ability to connect through API, EDI, proprietary formats, in web, in any other solution that a customer might have. Because the truth is, it all starts with the customer. It really starts with what the customer is capable of doing, and you can't pigeonhole a solution or pigeonhole a customer into one solution. You have to be able to address the needs of many customers, and that's really what our strategy has been all about.
Yeah, no, I think that's so important. I think it's something that we're seeing an increased need for. But would you also say that, I think not just from a distributor standpoint, but from an EMS standpoint, using API in general, do we think it's something that is needed for competitiveness, right? To enable to grow in order to move to the next level from a smaller mom and pop EMS company to a larger NPI or production type company? Are you going to need that kind of stuff to grow?
Yeah, I think so. I know we talk a lot about being in a global economy, and I think as the digital transformation and Industry 4.0 really takes hold and we get more and more involved in it, this creates, I won't say an equal playing field, but it really starts to equalize the opportunity. Again, think about a customer or an EMS that's got 4,000 lines on a quote and needs to process it. If you're a mom and pop EMS, that's a lot of resources that you have to focus on.
Yeah.
Being able to use the technology to be able to address those types of quotes, whether you're a mom and pop shop or whether you're a tier 1 EMS, is significant. But I do think it helps everybody.
Yeah. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I also think there's an interesting perspective from a supplier rep standpoint to say, my customers are no longer bugging me for the penny parts that we all know are there. They're popcorn parts, right? Now we can have more strategic conversations on those really expensive parts, those, high price parts that we can plan out for a year moving forward. Is that something that you guys are seeing at Future as well with this type of change?
Yeah, I am. And I think the behavioral change that we've seen is exactly that. The focus, of course, is always on the higher ASPs. You want to make sure that your A and B parts you're negotiating properly and getting the best costs
Yeah.
Where, as we've always said at Future, to our customers is focus on the parts that are really going to drive your business. Allow us to manage your C parts, but I think that the API allows you to do that. You can go right out there. You can get your prices and inventory availability. You can make your decisions real time and take that second step, address the higher dollar parts, and make sure you've gotten the best price and you've selected the right supplier for those devices.
Right, absolutely. Well, I don't want to, everyone else as well, we're having a great conversation, but feel free to put in your Q&A and chat and we'll get to those also, because I think it's important. I think this is a really interesting thing we're talking about. I want to come back to the API stuff because I will have some additional questions because I think there's some interesting points, but I also think we'd be hard pressed to not talk about what's going on in the industry right now, given the impact of 2020, given, the changes a little bit to our world. First, what was the impact of 2020 for Future? And, we'll eventually talk about the industry as a whole, but if you can speak to anything that happened from a Future standpoint, right? How did that change the way you guys are doing business?
So I think that as you look at 2020, and I know we all wanted to put it behind us, we were hoping that as we turned into 2021, it was going to be much better, and I think that it still will be. But 2021 really made us think about how we deal with our business, from managing people in our distribution centers and how we ensure that they're safe and they're healthy as they have to come to work. But there was a lot of conversations early in 2020 about whether we were going to see a U-type recovery or a V-type recovery. And it's interesting because as we headed into Q4, we started to see a significant change in our business, and it really started to take place before that. I think we had maybe a month or two where we were really looking at the business and trying to determine what it was going to be. But as you saw customers start to come back into their businesses, and the need for inventory and the need to be able to communicate really drove a different a business model for us as well as everybody. And I think we were talking earlier about the fact I think we're all kind of zoomed out a little bit. These virtual meetings are good, but the opportunity to meet face to face and conduct business in a more traditional way is something we're all looking for.
100%.
But our business was very strong last year. The opportunity to keep our distribution centers operational throughout the year was something we really focused on, and we did a really good job with that. The health and welfare of our employees was the number one thing that we focused on. And as a result of that, we were able to meet the customer demand.
Awesome. Yeah.
Some of the things that we did was, as we went through the early transformation, was really trying to understand where the customers were, the percentage of employees back on the production lines, and to ensure that we took their inventory that we had in our bonded inventory programs and put it aside for them, so that as their production lines started to ramp back up, we would be able to support them over a long period of time.
Maintains that relationship across the customer, making sure that's there. Shows the importance of those types of things.
It really is, and I think customers depend on it. And I think that with the tools that are available, those types of opportunities were realized. I mean, the API is an example. The ability for them to look into our inventory and see what we have, get a price, be able to call a salesperson if they chose to, was something that we really wanted to make sure our customers had available to them. More importantly was that the inventory that we have in our distribution center was readily available for our strategic customers through our supply chain programs.
Yeah. Shows the importance of a relationship with your vendors, making sure that supply chain process is solid, right?
Yeah, it really is. And as we transitioned into 2021, at the end of the year, we started to see lead times start to stretch. As we all know, capacity at the suppliers is starting to get strained. We're seeing extended lead times. And it's most interesting to me because as I look back over time, we used to see market allocation hit usually every 6 or 7, 8 years. Over the last 10 years, it seems to hit us now every 2 years, 1 to 2, 3 years. So we continue to see demand ramp for our customers, and it's ramping relatively quickly in the first quarter of this year. And the suppliers are doing what they can to keep their operations going. But COVID really impacted some of those suppliers' operations.
Yeah.
From a human capital standpoint, they just weren't able to get people in place quick enough to handle the ramp.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something I've been curious about, and I'm not sure how it impacts, especially the EMS space or the electronics industry as a whole, but the increased need for medical devices throughout last year, did that impact the way that this specific supply chain does business or impacts that, need and potentially lack of allocation right now?
So I think that early on there was a big focus on the medical for respirators and that type of need, and it smoothed out relatively quickly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things going on. You have 5G coming into place. The automotive industry is back and is driving a lot of demand early this year.
Yeah.
And there's more electronic content in a car today than there was 10 years ago, as an example. EV is a big part of our future, in the investment in electric vehicles and electric charging stations are driving a lot of the new demand and technologies. And then on top of that, you have new cell phones that are coming out and also consuming a lot of additional components. That, again, 10 years ago wasn't the case. And so can the suppliers keep up with the demand through technology change? And I think that's where we're currently at today.
That's a really interesting point. And I think not something that I always realize, that we switch technologies from a consumer basis so often nowadays, right? A year ago, I'll have a different laptop, and next year I'll say, well, let's try this new one, right? So we're switching so often. And when you think about it, that really impacts what else you're doing in the world and where you can get those types of components. And from an overall industry standpoint, do you think there's a resolution to that, or how do you keep up with that type of consumer demand? Because we are becoming quite a consumer-based, world, so to speak.
Well, I think, the suppliers are doing a good job at trying to come up with new technologies that encompass the need for connecting. Who would have thought 10 years ago that your refrigerator could be connected, or your microwave? It just baffles my mind of where this is going. And I think that our suppliers, the manufacturers, are really focused on that and trying to come up with the latest technology that maybe bundles some of those capabilities together, comes up with different components that will be able to support the need.
Yeah.
COVID has also driven some of the gaming industry, because as we all know, we're at home more often and more people are gaming, and that's also driving the need and is also adding to the complexity of today's market.
Yeah, I have a couple family members that when you don't have anything else to do, what else are you supposed to do, right? Some type of form of entertainment and connection. That's the Zoom happy hours, the gaming, whatever it is. Just wait till flying cars come out, and then that allocation is going to really get crazy. All the changes to the world that's happening. What are some of the other, you've talked about allocation and lead time. Are there any other things that you're seeing in the industry right now that are impacting the way that we approach 2021 or continue in 2021? Because crazy enough, February is next month already, or next week. So It's insane.
It's, you know, as I look back last year and I was talking to some of my colleagues, it's amazing how fast 2020 went by.
Yeah, insane.
We're already 3 weeks or 4 weeks into January, and I think that this year is also going to drive or pass us by really quickly. As we look at the current market conditions, we know that we're probably going to be in this allocation market probably through Q3,
Yeah.
which is going to drive a lot of different activities, whether you're trying to get inventory into your distribution centers and shipped out, and or whether you're a customer and you're trying to build buffer inventory or safety stock inventory. And it's very interesting because I've had a conversation with one of our major customers over the last few days who was vehemently opposed to having buffer inventory or safety stock, any at all. In fact, they drove to a zero lead time strategy. And recently have started to think differently about the need to have some level of safety stock, whether it's 2 weeks, a month, or even more, to ensure that they have enough inventory to keep their production lines up and running.
Right.
So as we go through this market allocation, as we see APIs come on, I think there's a huge opportunity for our customers because they'll have greater visibility to what's going on in the market. Because they can connect to many suppliers all at once. They can see inventory availability, they can see lead time, and price, of course. But I think this is more about an availability in an inventory position than it is a lead time type market, than a pricing market. I think most importantly is if you can get your hands on inventory today, you should take it.
Yeah.
You should solidify your forecasts and share as much information with your partners as you can, because that will ensure us as a distributor like Future Electronics to drive that information all the way through the supply chain and share it with our suppliers, and so that they can share it with their suppliers.
Right. That's an interesting point. From an EMS and an OEM standpoint, do you think that affects the way that they run their business, in the sense that if I'm a typical NPI shop that, to your point, have a zero lead time strategy, am I changing my business, and am I using this as a sales tactic to now say, hey, customer, we need to do more. We need to do more work together. And we're doing this not because we're trying to make you spend more money. We're doing this because we don't want you to ever have to run out of a product.
Yeah, I do. You know, and we talked a little about this yesterday, was that, you know, in the NPI world, you typically are buying to exact quantities, whether you're buying cut tape and mini rails. And I think that what I would suggest and what we're starting to see is that you look more at maybe buying a reel of components rather than the exact quantities, because again, if you have follow-on jobs, you're going to have to go back out in the market and see if you can get more inventory.
Right.
So when you start to rationalize your inventory portfolio, you know, resistors and capacitors that are very low dollars really not going to affect your inventory turns. And I think that it's important, and it's going to be important for our NPI shops to be able to convey that to their customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, speaking of the API stuff, with that visibility and saying, as of right now, there's 100,000 of this part in stock. I can query it probably in the next 24 hours. They might be 75,000. And that just shows you how quickly things can go through, right? Because to your point earlier, you have 3,000 customers. You don't know what those customers could be asking for, could be trying to allocate for their own customers.
Yeah, for sure. You know, the situation is dynamic and it's fluid. And everybody is scrambling, and they're expanding their AVLs to begin with. And I would say, first and foremost, is for the NPI shops and for any OEMs that are on the call today, is expand your AVLs.
Yeah.
Sole source is going to create a big challenge for you. And if you can create multi-sources, it creates not only the opportunity to buy from a number of different suppliers, but it also creates a competitive opportunity as well from a pricing standpoint.
Yeah, I think that kind of impacts like the initial design as well, right? Not just from an EMS OEM and I guess the OEM design as well, but from the initial time you design that product, keep in mind what the market's doing to say, well, I need to make sure this is adaptable, because if it's so, specific to what this has to be, what happens and what's the risk that takes on?
And I would add to it is that, over the last 5-7 years, we've seen a lot of merger and acquisition, or M&A, in the industry. And as we've seen that take place in the supplier or manufacturer world, we're seeing it in the EMS world as well.
Yeah.
As you see that, there become less suppliers that are able to support it. But not only that, is that you also start to see the manufacturers rationalize their portfolio of products, and you may start to see end-of-life notices come out because they're no longer going to support a device.
Yeah.
So if your bill of material is only has sole source on it, then you're left either to buy a huge amount of inventory to support a longer duration until you can design it out, which could cost you some significant money. Or you're going to be potentially shutting your product line down because you can't get devices.
Yeah, that it's actually makes me think of a different question, which I don't think we've even addressed or I've thought about in the past. But if I'm a traditional, let's say North America EMS company, or whatever specific region I am, is this potentially changing my buying strategies and saying, well, I typically buy from my North America stock and I specifically worry about that, but now I have to go out to who has stock in Europe and Asia, and I have to consider buying from there and paying that extra shipping cost, because that's sometimes the only way that I can manage that.
I think that it in this kind of market condition, it opens up the window as far as where you buy, and of course, with the current trade wars that are going on, tariffs are a big consideration as well. Yeah. But the duties in importation fees, buying from other regions, the freight costs have to come into play when you start to put your equation together. And when you look at today's market, as many of our customers have seen, transportation, so we talk about market allocation and we talk about parts. We talk about semiconductors and capacitors that are constrained, as an example. We're also seeing a huge constraint in the transportation world. Mm-hmm. The ports in LA are backed up, inventory sitting out there. There's not enough manpower to offload those ships. I understand from some of our partners that even the warehousing in the LA area is full of inventory and they don't have enough resources to move it. Yeah. So, and on the air side, as many of our customers know, a lot of inventory flies on commercial airplanes, in the belly of planes. With the reduction in commercial airlines, of course, that means there's a reduction in air capacity. Yeah. So that also strains the supply chain. So when you start to look at those aspects of your supply chain, you can't look at, I can get inventory in Asia as an example. If I put it on a boat today, what was a 6-week sailing time is now 10-week sailing time. I've got to add a couple of weeks to get it off the dock and then transport it if I'm going from the West Coast to the East Coast.
Right, absolutely.
And then on top of that, and we're all looking forward to the vaccine. The vaccine will also start to consume air capacity, because again, as we start to move the vaccine around the world, it's going to take precedence over other types of cargoes. We want to get that vaccine out to as many people as we can, and that's going to probably add. It's sort of my prediction, but it will add to the complexity of of the current market conditions.
Yeah. Well, and from my understanding, air, not just because there are less commercial planes, but also air travel is much more expensive than travel by sea. But when you have everything sitting on a dock, that also becomes expensive with sale inventory, as we would call it, right? So
Yes.
it's a lose-lose. I don't know what the scenario is there. I guess we're lucky it can't go bad, or you don't have an inventory with expiration dates, but still in the same.
Yeah, it is. It is, and again, we're in a good position as a distributor. And again, I often tell customers we're a supply chain company.
Yeah.
We may buy inventory, we may sell inventory, but we're a supply chain company, and we need to understand the supply chain in its entirety. And we like to share that information with our customers because, again, the more we share, the better educated they are, the better they'll have, the better they'll plan.
Yeah.
And it gives us all an opportunity to be able to address the needs of our customers.
Absolutely. I think this goes to a point, being in this industry for the time that you have you seen anything like this before? Has it mirroring any types of other scenarios that have happened? And if it does, what were the ways that we overcame it during that time?
So we see this from time to time, as I said earlier. We see market allocation where supply and demand just don't meet, and suppliers will add capacity on and to address the increase in demand. The challenge, the challenge we all face here is that in many cases, customers start to double order, which really creates a big problem for everybody because we start to question, is the demand real? So the first thing I tell our customers is, don't start placing orders with multiple distributors. It only creates more challenges.
Right.
And what we'll see is, as we've seen in the past, is the suppliers will start to add additional demand, additional capacity, which will allow them to meet the customer's demand. Yeah. Additionally, as we've seen a lot of outsourcing on the manufacturer side, using these foundries, and that's creating some additional challenges, because if you're a supplier and you have your own manufacturing capability, then you can control the output of devices. Whereas if you're outsourcing it to one of these foundries, you're really trying to manage that business like an EMS company.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's really important. And so we've talked a little bit about the trend challenges or the challenges within the industry. Circling back a little bit to the API stuff, as Future as a whole was working through developing that API, what were the types of challenges that you guys had to overcome for customer base or for internal reasons or whatever it was that obviously were worth doing, or else you wouldn't have done the API, but there's always challenges and we're all going to face challenges. I know we have it at CalcuQuote specifically, but what were those challenges, just so people can kind of understand the complexity that comes with an API?
So for us, as we started our journey, if you will, it was really trying to understand the customer needs, and being a global company and being able to address global needs. So not being regional and saying in Europe, we do it this way, and in North America, we do it this way, in Asia, we do it this way. We looked at it more on a global basis and said, how do we create a solution that meets the needs of all of our customers? So going out and understanding and asking those customers, what is it that you need in an API? What's the difference region to region? So those attributes were really important as we gathered our data and tried to assess how we were going to approach this, and then whether we had the right resources in-house, right, or should we outsource it to a third party. And so socializing all of those aspects of it, and then coming up with a solution on top of trying to launch our web platform
Right.
at the exact same time.
Yeah.
So it was really trying to, again, in summary, it's really trying to understand our global customers' needs. We looked at tier 1 EMS, we looked at tier 3, tier 4 EMS and said, all customers aren't created equally,
Right.
but in the grand scheme of things, we're trying to connect to as many customers and suppliers
Yeah.
as we possibly can with a solution that meets the needs of many.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there an education piece of this that Future had to, kind of either from an internal perspective or from an external customer perspective that, we definitely see saying 5 years ago when I first started with CalcuQuote, there was a lot of lack of education on what an API is and what can that even do, right? There was EDI, we knew about that, we kind of knew about FTP, but the technology has changed so much. How did you guys cope with the education piece of all of that?
Well, it was for me, it was a big education, and when you think about APIs, 3 simple words, and you think it can't be that difficult. But truthfully, it is difficult. There's a lot that comes into play, and as you and I know, we've dealt with this for a very long time. So there was an education on the way we were going to address it, the types of software we were going to utilize, and the approach that we were going to take as far as going out into the market.
Yeah.
In having that knowledge of 30 years of doing participating with customers and suppliers in the EDI world, we really had a lot of framework built into our business process. So we took a lot of that knowledge and we utilized that to build out the API, as I said. The education part, I think the leadership team at Future Electronics got it early on. They thought that and knew that this would be a great opportunity to connect with a lot of customers across vast regions that we potentially couldn't touch because there just isn't enough people to do so.
Yeah.
And as the world gets faster and faster, the need to be able to communicate in a variety of ways was one of the most important elements as we started to build the foundation.
Yeah. And I think I also forget this sometimes too. It's still so new, right? It is still a new thing. And I think that means that the education is just going to have to continue through every single aspect, through the manufacturers, through the OEMs, through EMS companies, through distributors, right? There's ongoing education for something like an API that we forget is, oh, we have it, that's great, let's do it. Well, there's continuation, right? You don't just learn something and then never remember about it ever again. So
for sure, in again, looking back, in the EDI world, there were standards and whether it was European ANSI X12 or the EDIFACT standards for the rest of the world.
Yeah.
In the API world, there aren't any standards.
Yeah.
So the need to try and stratify, determine what the needs are going to be, and then working with CalcuQuote to try and finalize or define what those data points and how we're going to communicate and what's the transport process going to be as far as data back and forth is just one aspect. Then when you get into the transportation world, which transportation is really moving forward with API as well, is, what's their needs and how are they going to connect with companies like FedEx or UPS or Future Electronics. And again, we're early in this adventure. And I think over time, over the next 5 years, we'll start to see it. And I know I talked to many of our customers. We had a supply chain conference last year in Memphis. And one of the topics that came up with our customers was the need to standardize like EDI. And there was a lot of people that said this would be one of the things that they would like to see in the future. We haven't seen that yet, but I can see that potentially down the road as one of the opportunities, that if there were some kind of standards, it would make it easier for a customer to connect, for a supplier to connect, in any industry.
Yeah, I'm writing that down in my head and my mental thoughts to remember to have a conversation about, because I think you're right. There's right now everybody does it a little bit differently, which is totally fine, but there will be a time that says to be competitive, there has to be some kind of standard along with everything. So
Yeah, there is, and again, we've been talking for many years about this and collaborated, and we thank you guys for helping us as we got involved in this early on.
yeah.
But the conversations with some customers, and the bigger the customer, the bigger the want.
Yeah.
And I remember talking with one of our EMS partners, and the list of attributes that they wanted to exchange with us when we started was, it was probably 10 or 15, and then it grew.
Yeah.
And then it grew and it grew and it grew. So that need for standards would have been beneficial, because again, it changed, and as we both know, that
Yeah.
development time is valuable.
Absolutely.
Costs money to do so, and
Yeah.
you want to do the best job you can for your customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, no, I think all of that's really important. I think everything that we've talked about is so critical for what we're going through right now. To the audience, and I think it's been a great conversation when we haven't lost anybody throughout this entire time. So that's great to see. Please feel free to put questions and messages into the chat and Q&A. I have one final thing for Tom, but after that, we'll turn it over if there are anything. So please don't hesitate to put them there. This doesn't really relate to a trend or anything like that, but I think it's an important thing from a large company like Future. How did you guys keep a good culture from a company perspective with what's going on, and what were some of the tactics that you use? I think it's a curiosity point from everybody with the changing and how we're working.
So it is interesting to see how things have changed over the last year. And I think, you read a lot about culture, and a lot of CEOs are concerned about losing that culture, a piece of it, because of that day-to-day interaction. And you want to make sure that your company maintains that culture and has that standard mission statement where everybody is involved. We've done a lot of unique things. We did some videos where employees would send in videos and about what they're doing at home. And I know I sent one out myself, kind of just a well wishes to everybody. But we've done. I think we've transitioned our communication with our employees around the world. I think we've stepped up our game. I think we're better at communicating today than we ever were on a global basis. We use virtual meetings for everything, which is good and bad. I have to say, you're constantly being contacted by someone who wants to have a conversation with you.
Working more for sure.
Working more, but culturally, I think we as a company have done a really good job, as I said, with stepping up the communication. I know our distribution center team has done an amazing job going into the office every day, and we were really concerned about them in their health, but not only their health, but the health of their family. And we've taken steps to ensure that everybody was well taken care of, and from that perspective. And as a team, as an example, as a supply chain team, we sent out thank you notes, just a quick note to say to every level of the distribution team, say, hey, thanks. We know that you're working in a very challenging environment. We really appreciate what you're doing for us. Our customers appreciate it. Keep up the good work and stay healthy. And those little things have really motivated a lot of people in the company. And I always think it's the little things that we do that makes the biggest impact on people.
Absolutely. A little goes a long way, especially in
Yeah.
these times. So I'm with you. Well, Tom, I can't thank you enough for, doing this and chatting with us. I think it's so important to have these types of conversations, especially as we go into the year. We'll give it a couple minutes if anybody has any questions, but if you have any other closing thoughts or things that you want to address, feel free. But I think it's been so good to chat through all of this.
Well, Kaitlyn, again, I think the the digital transformation is really driving us to be better at what we do. And I think, as I said, Industry 4.0 is going to have a huge impact as we start to adopt more on with AI and even just overall automation. I know I was in a factory in Europe a couple of years ago, and they were using robots to do material handling, and I thought,
Crazy.
wow, this is pretty cool, and it's amazing. And in the old days when I worked at Raytheon, we used guide wires and to transport material. So we had to put guide wire down on the floor, and the cart would go on an axis.
Yeah.
These robots were using GPS, and had mapped the facility, and they could move from place to place. And I thought, this is pretty amazing. And if you think about where we're at, and this was 3 or 4 years ago, if you think where we're at then, imagine where we'll be. As you said, at some point we'll see flying cars. But as an industry, the ability to incorporate automation into a business process, a physical process, is going to be realized very shortly.
Yeah.
And I think from a business process, the ability to automate and connect and exchange data is so important because it drives cost out of our business, but it also drives efficiencies across the entire platform.
Yeah, 100%. We did have one question that just came in, and I think you might have been kind of addressing it in a roundabout way, but how small EMS companies can find customers during the pandemic. I don't know that we know the answer to that, but I think if you can, and Tom, feel free to add to this and speak to this as well, but if you can add automation and add some of the technology to the mundane tasks that you have to do, of course, but if that gives you that ability to do that, then you can go out and be much more strategic with how you approach customers, how you market to them, how you do all of that initial stuff, and add the automation on the other side.
And I would agree with you. And I think the automation, whether it's API or any kind of communication protocol, but also on the physical side of it, allows an OEM or a customer that's looking for someone to look at your business and say, are they efficient? Can they be cost competitive in that environment? And I think that those are the things that you can absolutely take advantage of to drive cost out.
Yeah, absolutely. One last question, and then we'll kind of conclude, but I appreciate all the questions from everybody. Question from somebody, looks like they may know you in the past life, but will a typical API become more and more educated over time from an asset management perspective? Meaning, will hits on the inventory for quotes by multiple customers start driving classification on part levels, allowing distributors to purchase stock or purchase and stock parts better, and then negotiate with suppliers better based on a global demand?
Yeah, yes, I think so. I think what it allows us to do is to use the data, and we probably didn't talk enough about big data, but again, 5 years ago, all we talked about was big data, but we didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Right now, we have the tools with AI, and the API helps us adapt those tools to it. And it allows us to do the analytics that is so needed to drive inventory buys and make better decisions. I think from a customer standpoint, it's huge opportunity because, again, making better decisions is the one thing that changes the dynamics of your business.
Agreed.
And then one bad decision can cost you a lot of money, for sure.
Snowball effect.
Yeah, so I do think so. I think it's gonna drive improvements in our business, in our customers' business, and in our suppliers business as well.
Yeah, there's a huge, I think, value of opportunity that comes with this, right? I think this is just the beginning, which is an exciting thing for all of us to turn point into. Well, Tom, again, thank you so much for having these conversations. We're almost at the 10 a.m. Central Hour in Texas and the 11 a.m. Central Hour. It went by so quickly, which means it's always a good conversation. So thank you again for being here. And if anybody has any other questions for Tom, future, for myself at CalcuQuote, definitely let us know, and we're happy to answer those. But Tom, thanks again for being here.
Kaitlyn, thank you, and thanks to the team at CalcuQuote. As I said to you earlier, you were a big part of our API development. We really appreciate the collaboration, and I know our customers that we share are very appreciative to the tools that we have together, and we'll only get better at it.
Absolutely, and back at you as well. So we appreciate everyone at Future also for what we've been able to build. So we're excited to see what the future holds.
Oh, good. Good.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Tom, and thank you everybody else for joining. And we'll send out a recording here shortly for what we chatted about. And if there is anything else, just let us know. But have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tom. Bye-bye.